What's going on, guys? Jeff here, Corals Unlimited. Today we got a brand new video for you. We're going to be taking a look at how to cycle a nano reef tank. But before we jump into that, if this is your first time being here, this is where I talk about everything reef tank related. So if you love reef tanks like I do, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the bell so you can be notified every single time that I upload a new video. Now I got a little tip for you that's going to help you cycle your tank just a skosh bit faster, so make sure you stick around for that. All right, so it's been a day or two since we first set eyes on this little guy. It's cleared up pretty good. Very typical of when you first set up a tank that there's like this little bit of dust. You can kind of see it towards the bottom where the sand meets the glass. That will build up on the inside of the glass. Now when you go to clean that, you're gonna wanna be very careful because there might be little bits of sand in there and you might scratch up your glass a little bit. So I like to use a paper towel and not get too crazy with the cleaning. It's going to help make sure that you don't scratch that glass up. Here we are a couple days later. Tank's cleared up pretty good, and we're going to get into some of the things that are going to help you get this tank cycled. The typical cycle on a reef tank is going to take you about 4 to 6 weeks. And really what is happening in that time is the nitrogen cycle. So with the nitrogen cycle, it is something that needs to take place for you to be able to keep fish and inverts in the tank. You can be a little unconventional and put corals into the tank prior to the tank actually being cycled, but if you're unfamiliar with corals and what their needs are, I'd probably avoid going down that road. Now, as far as the nitrogen cycle goes with a nano reef tank, it's going to take about 4 to 6 weeks, and it will naturally happen all on its own. You actually don't have to do anything at all. All you got to do is make sure that there's water in there, heat, don't really even need a light source, and it'll happen all on its own. You can literally stop watching this video right now. Still here? And for those of you that are still watching, there are ways of speeding up the cycle process and make it happen a little bit quicker. And this isn't just to nano reef tanks, this is to all reef tanks in general. And you can do that by adding bacteria to the tank. But again, you don't even need to add bacteria. You could also just go the route of using live sand. In some cases, that will actually help speed up the process of cycling the tank because there is bacteria present and there is some type of food source for the bacteria present, and it doesn't even need to be present. It can happen all on its own. So anything that you do is going to be beneficial to speeding up that process. Now, a product that I like to use and have used for years to cycle tanks is Dr. Tim's One and Only. This is a live nitrifying bacteria product, and there is actually substrate in here as well. So when you pour it into the tank, it's going to make the tank a little cloudy, and you also want to make sure that you scoop up some of the water from your tank and rinse this bottle clean when you put it into your system, because you want to make sure you're getting all the bacterias. Now, we talked about in the previous video where we actually set this tank up that you can do some things to speed up the process in cycling a tank just beyond adding bacteria. And one of the things that I like to do to speed up that process is actually water the tank down. So for me, I typically keep my tanks at about 35 parts per thousand. So for me, I like to keep my tanks, as far as from a salinity standpoint, at about 35 parts per thousand. Some folks go 34 or 33. And what that's gonna do for you is it's gonna give you a little bit of play on either side, that you're not too low to the point where you need to be worried about it, and you're not too high that you need to make sure the tank is topped off all the time. But a thing that you can do beyond adding bacteria to the tank is actually watering down the tank. Now, this nano reef tank, when we set it up, I actually mix the salt for the tank at 20 parts per thousand. What actually can happen when you water the tank down is the bacteria cell actually spends less energy trying to maintain its shape and puts more energy into making more bacteria. And the more bacteria that becomes present, the faster the cycle will take place in the tank, and you'll be a happy hobbyist. All right, so we got the tank set up, it's running, we got water in there, it's at the correct temperature. It's been up for a couple days now. You can put the bacteria in immediately, but sometimes I like to let things just kind of settle out before I get started with this. And then you want to make sure that if you're going the Dr. Tim's route, that you're getting the correct size bottle that you need for your size tank. Now, this is the 2-ounce bottle, and this can help cycle a tank up to 30 gallons. And in that, so some folks might be like, all right, that's a little too much to put in the tank, but actually you can't overdose this product. You can add a ton of it. You can add the big bottle if you wanted, and only so much bacteria is going to take hold and then help the tank get into the cycling process. So we have enough bacteria here to cycle 30 gallons, but we should be all set to add all of this. Now we got it opened up. I'm going to pour it in. You see it's kind of making the water a little bit cloudy. That is substrate that the bacteria is attached to. Then I usually like to sink the bottle and then pour the rest in, just to make sure that we're getting all the goodness. So you can see here, tank's a little bit cloudy. It's actually probably a little bit more cloudy to me than it is to you. This should clear up in a few days and the bacteria will start to take hold and we'll be in hopefully pretty good shape as far as getting the cycle of the Nano Reef tank up and going. So there's a lot of things to consider when you are in that stage of cycling your tank, and one of the most important things that you can do is test your tank. Now there's a lot of products out there to do that with, and a lot of folks tend to gravitate towards the more beginner-friendly stuff like the API test kits. These are really quick, easy, fast ways to test your tank to make sure that you are actually in the cycling process or what stage of the cycling process that you are in. Now, as far as the cycling process goes, at first you're going to have an ammonia spike, and that just comes from whether you have some type of food in the tank for the bacteria or an actual ammonia source. It's really important to make sure that you're keeping an eye on this during the cycling process, because if your ammonia gets too high, that might end up causing complications further down the road. And it's important to understand that there are different types of bacteria that need to take place for the cycle to be complete. Now, the first step in cycling tank, you're going to have ammonia present in the system. Once the bacteria that consumes ammonia starts to develop and grow in the tank, it will convert the ammonia to NO2, which is the second step. Once you have no ammonia present and you have NO2 present, you're in the middle of the cycle process, and then another species of bacteria will start to grow, consume that, and then convert the NO2 to NO3. Now, when I first opened the store, you can see the vertical uprights up there in the back. I put in live sand and ammonium in Dr. Tim's, and what ended up happening in this situation where I caused a ammonia spike, I caused a little bit too big of an ammonia spike, and what ended up happening was the ammonia consuming bacteria grew really fast, converted it to NO2, but the NO2 consuming bacteria does not typically grow as fast as the ammonia consuming bacteria. And what ended up happening was my cycle actually ended up collapsing. It got too high in the NO2 for too long, ended up causing a problem. Now, if this situation ends up happening for you, you want to actually do a water change. Don't go into the substrate, get a siphon and just pull water out of the tank to reduce the NO2 when it is north of 2 parts per million. But I'm only going to recommend that you do the water change if you're in this situation. Outside of that, you do not do a water change during the cycle. You want to just leave it be and let it do its thing. So once you have no ammonia, no NO2, and measurable NO3, your tank is essentially cycled and it is now safe to put fish and inverts into the system. So one thing I think that is worth mentioning when you're talking about the cycling process in your reef tank is the tools that you're using to track that progress. And even though that these tools are readily available, they're not the most accurate, and it's important to take that information into consideration when you're looking at your test results. I like to consider them more horseshoes and hand grenades type situation, where you're basically getting an indication that it's present, not so much a measurement. And if accuracy is your concern, I'd really recommend taking a look at the Hanna Instruments products to track the cycle process of your reef tank. They are far more accurate than the API counterparts and are going to give you a little bit better of a readout, and it's a digital format, so you actually will see the ebbs and flows of the cycle process with your tank. So cycling a Nano Reef tank should be relatively easy. Just make sure you're staying on top of your parameters, keeping an eye on that ammonia and that NO2 so it doesn't get out of control, and you should do just fine. If you want to learn more about Nano Reef tanks, check this video out. I will see you over there.